Hey everyone. Well, I just did a whole entire live on Instagram thinking that I was also streaming to Facebook. I was not. So here I am now on Facebook a little bit late at 12:20. Usually we start at noon Eastern for Launch and Learn, which is my weekly live where we talk about all things launching. And that could be leadership, teams, systems, launch strategy, processes. Today, particularly, we are going to talk about some tips for you for before, during, and after your launch. If you find yourself feeling drained or exhausted after launching. Live launching can be an intense process, right? It's a lot of energy invested, time invested, money and resources and team invested. And it can feel really intense, right? So I wanted to talk about this today because a lot of people really like when you say live launching, they're like, right? And you see like Facebook ads, right? Of like, stop live launching or live launching's bad or live launching's dead or do this instead, right? All that kind of stuff. And I personally love live launching. I love the energy around live launching. I find it so fun. I find it recharging, right? However, it is an intense process regardless, right? Because of all the energy that's being put in. And it can still leave you feeling, exhausted at the end. So just want to talk about a couple of these tips today. So we're going to talk about before, during, and after. So before your launch, one of the best ways to get ahead of feeling drained and exhausted is to actually plan ahead your launch. And I know a lot of people, they get just in the day-to-day to their business. And when it's time to launch, they're kind of just picking a date, right? They may not be thinking too far ahead. And they let their team know, like, okay, we're launching on this date. And they don't really come up with a cohesive plan to make sure that things are happening on a schedule. And this is important because I've seen a lot of people that do what I call like the last minute launching, right? And it's again, it's not looking ahead even like 3 months, 6 months, a year in your business, but kind of like month by month, right? Of what you're launching, what's coming up. And the tendency then is to get in this pattern of doing things last minute, right? And what that does when you get in that pattern is it it makes everything you do after that, right? If you get behind on one thing, it makes everything you do, right? It's like the domino effect. Everything else gets pushed back, right? And then if you're scheduling things out like per week, right, and you're just looking ahead to the week and like, okay, this is what's happening this week, and let's say you need to create copy for your VA to send out for your promo emails for that week for your launch. If you already have a full schedule that week, or you had calls booked that week, or you had personal obligations that week, and you didn't plan ahead to be doing the copy, and you get behind, then your VA is going to get behind. Okay. And once you get behind on one thing, you're going to get behind on the next thing and the next thing, right? And the pressure and the anxiety just builds and builds and builds for both you and your team, right? You're going to feel bad because you're getting things done last minute. Your team's going to feel stressed out because they're trying to get things done last minute. And that's, of course, when a lot of mistakes happen too, right? So then things aren't going out as quality. Then you're having these breakdowns, more stress, right? And it just kind of snowballs. So what I suggest is figuring out, based on how you kind of operate yourself in your business, is some kind of planning cadence where you know, like, this is about how much time we need to plan for our launch. And this can be a little trial and error in the beginning, right? Trying to figure this out. But you're not going to figure out unless you start. So planning ahead quarterly, at least quarterly, even more if you're doing like a big launch, right? On what needs to happen when. And the way that you do that is by reverse engineering, right? You start at the end when you're launching, and I recommend at the very least, even if you're not going to do it down to the minutest details, which I do because I'm a launch manager and that's what I love to do. But if you don't have someone on your team to do that, then dialing back week by week, what gets to happen every single week, whether it's copy, whether it's development, whether it's promotion, whether it's sales, all those parts of your launch, figuring out week by week by week what's happening every single week of your launch. checking in with your team. That's a process you can go through with your team, or you can do it on your own and then share it with your team and get feedback. But going through and making sure that the team's available that week, that you're available that week, that your time is blocked off or their time is blocked off, to make sure that you all have enough time to dedicate to those things each week. And so instead of, kind of doing things in the last minute, or like that the beginning of that week figuring out what's happening in the upcoming week, you have a solid plan. You can plan your time ahead of time, and that relieves a lot of that pressure and that stress. Okay, so that's for before your launch. During your launch, there's two things. One is to delegate. And this depends on where you're at in business, how you do this, right? But I work with people that have teams of 1 all the way up to 10 plus. And so thinking about, well, I guess this kind of goes, and I was saying this in my video I did on Instagram too. This goes back to the planning a little bit. So maybe it's both. It's before and during, right? But when you're going through your launch, before you go through your launch, you could do a time study, right? And figuring out what things you're doing in your business that actually don't need to be done by you. I did a live on this a few weeks ago. A good process for this is to look at everything you're doing in your business. And for me, when I do time studies, I look at both what I'm doing personally and in my business, because in my past, I've actually hired personal assistants. Before I hired anyone in my business, I hired a personal assistant, because the things for me, when my business is really abundant, the things for me that went to the back burner were my personal things, right? Like setting up appointments or filling out the paperwork for the kids or whatever needed to happen. Those were the things that went to the back burner. So for me, and those were the things I really don't have any desire to do. So those were the things that I chose to outsource. But I wouldn't have been known what to outsource if I wasn't aware of what those things were. So before going into your launch, as preparation for your launch, you can do a time study and see what things operationally are you already doing in your business, and also what things are you thinking to be responsible for in your launch, and seeing if those things actually need to be done, because there's a lot of stuff we do in our business that doesn't actually need to be done. We do it because we've always done it. We do it because we think it needs to get done. We have some false idea that it's moving us towards our goal. It may not be. So really looking at everything you're doing and assessing its impact, and if it's impactful enough to continue to do. And if it's not, let it go. Don't even do it. Take it off the list. So does it need to get done? Can it be automated? Is it something you can automate? Is it an email outreach? Is it a text message? Anything like that? Is it something that can be automated? So if it's something that does need to get done, it's something that can't be automated, then you want to see if you can delegate it to someone on your team. And so you can do this process prior to your launch, but also as you're going through your launch, when you go in to do things, be really aware and cognizant of, does this need to get done? And does it need to get done by me? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You may think, well, I don't have the money to pay my team extra to start giving them more things. Or my person doesn't know how to do this. That's not part of their role. Or it's just easier for me to do it, right? Those are all the things. I'm guilty of this too. When I go to do things, instead of delegating it, I wind up doing it myself. But the thing that you really want to consider is what it's costing you, right? For you to continue to do it. If it's not something that's in your zone of genius, in your lane, something that is the things that only you can do. If it's things that other people can do better, faster, cheaper, then consider whether or not that's something that can be delegated. And the other thing is, you can consider hiring support just for your launch. If you're worried about your team having the bandwidth, or you're worried about, maybe you have a high earning team member that you're a little worried about delegating to, you can consider hiring a VA that already has experience with the type of launch that you're doing, whether it's a challenge or it's a summit. Right? And hire just like ad hoc kind of support for that specific launch. Okay. The other thing during your launch to help preserve your energy so you don't feel completely drained by the end of your launch is to not let go of your self-care practices. And I'm saying this to myself too. I've done this before. I mean, at one point in my business, I had 12 one-on-one clients, just myself. I had no team. I had 12 pretty demanding clients, one-on-one clients in my business. If multiple people were launching at the same time, the first thing that went for me, this was about 3 years ago, the first thing that went for me was my self-care, right? It was getting up and exercising. It was meditating. It was having healthy food at the ready. It was getting a good night's sleep. All that stuff went, right? Because it was like, I got clients to serve. I got to be on top of this, right? What that did, right? What happens when we don't get enough sleep? What happens when our nutrition isn't good? What happens when we don't take the time to meditate or to exercise or to get the massage that we usually get or to go to the chiropractor? These are all things I do for my self-care. One day might not have that big of an effect. For me, if I lose one good night's sleep, it has a pretty big effect on me at 41 years old. I don't know about anybody else. But I worked with a nutritionist once, and one of the things she said to me was that you can never catch up on sleep. She said people have this like false idea in their head that they can, if they lose, if they don't sleep one night, they can catch up on the sleep the next day. Can't actually catch up on your sleep. So if you want to show up as your best self, making sure that you're still committed to those self-care practices during your launch is really important, and encouraging your team to stick to their self-care practices as well. Making sure that you have clear expectations, that people aren't expected to be on around the clock, that you know when they're going to be on and what the response time is, and making sure that you're continuing with the self-care practices. If some things have to get released, then figure out what are those crucial ones that you absolutely got to stick to. And for me, that's sleep. For me, that is absolutely sleep. Because if I don't have sleep, I'm not focused. I'm irritable. So I can't show up as a really strong leader if I'm like getting irritable with people asking me questions or having to follow up on things or all the stuff that happens in launching, right? So pick at least one of those self-care routines to continue during your launch, and hopefully all of them. And the way that you do that, again, get support with delegating, figuring out if there's things that you are doing that don't need to get done, that don't contribute to the result. Okay. And then finally, after your launch, and again, this goes back to planning, but after your launch, make sure you have a plan for post-launch. Make sure you plan ahead for your post-launch. So if you, and the reason why I say this is because after your launch, you want to give yourself and your team space to restore and recharge. You've just gone through a really intense process, even if it's the best planned launch, right? I'm a launch manager. I love planning launches. It's my favorite thing to do. I love being in live launches. I love the energy. It is really intense. Okay. Like I shared, I don't know if I shared this at the beginning. I had 3 clients in launch last week. It was go time. I was on, right? And for me to be able to have space after is really important. You know the feeling, right? When you're like, you have so much stuff to do and you get all the stuff done and then you're done and you're like, am I forgetting to do something? That's kind of how I feel after I go through a week when I have 3 clients launching, right? Like this week's like, breathing, right? And it's like, oh, wait, where'd all that energy go, right? But making sure that you're not going back to back to back to back to back in your business, or back to back to back with whatever it is when you go through a launch, because it is intense. Whether it's really well planned and it's a lot of fun, it's still a lot of energy, still a lot of output. So leave space for yourself and your team. Don't forget about your team. It's not just about you. If your team's supporting you through this launch, chances are they're putting in more hours than you. Just making sure everything's in place, especially if you're doing last minute launching, right? It's a lot of time and energy invested on their part as well. So make sure everybody has space to restore and recharge. And the way that you can do that is to plan ahead for your post-launch. Know what is happening after your launch ends. Have your system set up for your client onboarding. If you're not sure if you're going to need continued cash flow or revenue flow into your business, have a plan for a downsell opportunity. Not everybody is going to buy into your program or your course as they go through the launch with you. And not everybody should or has to, right? So what are you going to do to meet those people where they're at and support them after they've gone through this process with you? If you've taken people through a challenge, if you've taken people through a summit, hopefully they've gone through a transformation and you've opened something up for them. And to just take them through that process, and just because they don't, maybe take the next step with you, to just go, okay, well, those aren't my people. Or maybe some of them aren't, but some of them probably are. They're just not there yet. So do you already have an offering, or do you have an offering you can create for those people to meet them where they're at? And can you plan ahead for that so it's all set when launch is over? Those people get supported. You have additional cash flow into your business. Your team has everything planned out and set up for when the launch is over. So planning ahead for your post-launch, making sure you and your team have time for rest and restoration, and recharging, and that you have a plan for your post-launch in terms of your clients being supported. And a huge part of that is having automation set up for your onboarding so that your team doesn't have to be manually onboarding people. How much of that can you automate? And then part of that post-launch planning is, how are you going to support the people that have gone through with you that haven't taken the next step? Because we want to continue that relationship. There's people in that group of people that didn't take the next step that are still potential clients, and you still have some level of responsibility to make sure that they, just like you went through this intense period with your launch. If you've created a really intense transformation for someone through your challenge or your summit or whatever it is you're launching, and then you're just like, peace. How can you continue to nurture them and support them? It doesn't have to be a downsell. It can be just a nurture. It can be, how are you going to continue to nurture them? Do you go back? Do you have a nurture sequence set up in your business? How do you nurture people after things like this? So again, this all kind of goes back to the planning, which makes sense because I'm a planner. All roads will lead to planning ahead because that's what works for me. And that's what I've seen work for people in their launches. So thinking about, again, to recap, to avoid the feeling of drain or exhaustion after you've just gone through a live launch, is to plan ahead. Create enough time to plan ahead. Plan a week-by-week summary of what gets to happen when. Check in with your team. Get their buy-in. Make sure everyone can commit. Understand what the expectations are. Before and during your launch, making sure that you know what activities you're going to focus on. And if there are activities that you get to release and let go of that don't even need to get done, or if there's things you can automate or delegate going into your launch. And then as you're going through your launch, being cognizant of where you're spending your time. If there's a possibility to delegate things so that your energy is preserved for the things that only you can do as part of that launch. And then finally, planning for your post-launch. So leaving time for rest and restoration for your team and recharging, and how you're going to nurture and support both the people that enrolled into your program and even the people that did not, that just went through this process with you. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, guys. I will be back here again next week at noon Eastern for Launch and Learn. Have an awesome weekend. If you have any questions, if you have any insight, please drop them in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week.